You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Sports science, strength and conditioning, high performance coaching. Welcome to the Decoding Excellence Show. Today's episode of the Decoding Excellence Show is brought to you by VOD Performance, the makers of the Nordboard, the Dashboard, and the Groin Bar. Whether it's return to play, rehabilitation, or performance testing and training, VOD Performance has the tools you need. So who's actually using VOD Performance technology? I don't know, something like 14 NFL, 19 NCAA, 15 English Premier League, 7 English Championship, 5 NBA teams, and 6 MLB teams. They have the tools you need to get the best out of your athletes. Check them out at vodperformance.com. On today's episode of the Decoding Excellence Show, I am joined with Mark Watts. I'm excited to have Mark on. Mark is a 5th grade school teacher and a U8 girls soccer coach in Columbus, Ohio. Formerly, Mark was the Director of Education at EliteFTS.com and the host of an Elite FTS Sport Performance podcast. The Elite FTS Sports Performance podcast was actually one of which that I listened to on the regular. He has a master's degree in exercise science and health promotion from California University of PA and a master's degree in elementary education from Clarion University of PA. He has held professional certifications through the NSCA, the CSCCA, NASM, and USAW, a whole host of professional certifications. Watts has worked with collegiate athletes in over 20 different sports at the Division 1, 2, and 3 levels for over 15 years as a strength and conditioning and or football coach at institutions such as Denison University, the United States Military Academy at West Point, and Clarion University. He has completed internships at Ohio State University and the University of Tulsa. Coach played college football at Clarion University and has competed in powerlifting, strongman, and Olympic weightlifting. In part 1 of this interview, we get into Mark's background and the reason he got into strength and conditioning, some of the successes, some of the failures, and some of how he used both of those to really shape his coaching philosophy and what he's learned and how he's evolved over the course of his career. We talk about the industry of strength and conditioning, what we can do better, how we can change, and how we can be advocates for the next generation of strength and conditioning. This is part 1 of a 2-part episode with Coach Watts. I can't wait to bring it to you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Coach Mark Watts. Coach, welcome to the Decoding Excellence Show. How are you?
Adam, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Things are well here.
Man, I'm so excited to have you on the show because, as you might not know, I have listened to almost every single one of your Elite FTS podcasts, and some of the materials that you have wrote specifically about internships and the materials surrounding that, I've shared with my performance staff at stops at Wichita State and now here at Colorado. So you are a treasure trove of information, my man, and I am excited to finally get you on the show and share some of your wisdoms with the listening audience.
Well, the fact that you'd say that I'm a treasure, I don't know, maybe you just don't know too many coaches or something, but I never thought that I would be that. But I really do appreciate it. No, that it really means a lot to me that because especially once I stepped away from coaching, it was a way for me to kind of reflect and not to be cliche, but see the forest through the trees and kind of give back. And it's one of those things where you can reflect. You don't have anything invested, so you can reflect a little more openly on some of your mistakes and what you could do. But like I said, that means a lot to me. You say that, and it's kind of surreal that people would kind of look at some of the bonehead things I've done in the past and what I've learned from them and being able to use it to your advantage. So, but it does mean a lot to me. You say that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because the thing that I think really resonates to me about you is just the fact that you have such a willingness to share and to show your work of what you've done and some of those successes and failures. And you've been on platforms where you've been sort of critical of our industry, which is what we need sometimes, some of that honesty. And you've been really a great mouthpiece to share what I think so many of us say in private, but don't necessarily get the platform to share it on a public forum. And I think that you, among others, are leading the charge and really trying to create a better industry for us strength and conditioning coaches. So I want to thank you. But to start with, I'd love to hear what you're currently up to and just give you an opportunity to sort of tell your own story in your own words.
Well, I would probably have to give you the shortest version I can, because I mean, it's been, they always have those drawings of success, and it's never a straight line. And my line has been just spiraling and in circles, and so it just the way that my path has gone has just been and no one can really replicate what you go through and what your situation is, because there's so many other aspects. And I think it's not just about who you are in the weight room or who you are on the field or the court. I think it's who you are as a person. And I think as much as we as coaches have been defined by what we do, it's not necessarily means that it's who we are. So for me, I think when I got out of high school and I went in the Marine Corps, and I knew that there was something that I needed to do. And for me, it was I wanted to try and walk on as a college football player. And that was the thing that kind of started everything, because I was, I walked on to Clarion University, a Division II school, and I had no business really, playing Division II football. I mean, I was way undersized, and I played nose guard, and most of my career I was on a scout team. So I think, looking ahead, I think it helped me as a coach, because I was able to relate to those players that had limited time, and I knew, I had to learn firsthand that, what you do on every day of the week except for Saturdays is probably more critical for everybody else around you. So it was a good lesson for me to realize that what I was in charge of was my own actions, but it did affect everybody else on the team, and that got me, because I was so passionate about football, but my athletic ability, probably didn't match, my passion for it, but it got me into student coaching. And then once I had a love for training with weights, and that kind of got me in a path where I was able to, to coach football and to subsequently, get involved in the strength and conditioning aspect of it. So after I was a student coach, and then I, did a GA and got my master's degree, I was kind of at that crossroads whether to get into teaching, because I had my master's was in elementary education. But I had to make a decision, and I ended up getting a job offer at Allegheny College, and it's one of those things, and this, Adam, as well as anybody, like those introductory level positions. I mean, it was like $15,000 a year, and I got housing, so I was like, I was big time, because they gave me a crappy apartment, but I was fortunate, to have that, and I was fortunate to have that ability to continue to coach around people and learn some things. And, I was, one of the best lessons that I got when I first started out was when I was at Clarion. I was a student coach, and as a student coach, I had my own position, which was unheard of. And I coached more people on the defensive side of the ball. I coached all 4 D linemen, and none of the other coaches, coached that many guys. And I had a lot of responsibility. And then, I was a GA, and I was in the same situation. And when there was a full-time position open, my head coach never hired me. And I was, at the time, and this is back in basically, I think it was 1999, 2000. I was so disheartened by that I didn't get hired. I know the system, I know the school, I know recruiting, I know everything. And it was, Adam, it was the best thing that could ever happen to me, because I would have been a probably I would have been a below average coach, because I didn't know anything except for that situation. And I think that's us as coaches, we want to have something that's familiar to us, because it's really hard to kind of step away to a position where, and everybody knows that you don't grow without change. But that's what I needed. And I really got into a situation which my strengths did not match up with my head coaches. And it was a really good learning experience for me. And then a position opened at Denison University. That would have been in 2002. And I stayed there. And it was one of those positions where I was a defensive coordinator and I was still the head strength coach for all the sports at Denison at the time, and still teaching classes. And it's that, that old, basically that small school model where we can't pay you that much, but we can give you as many different, job titles as we can. And hopefully that, gets you to kind of, more prepared, I guess. And I was a way to, and I knew that at some point, for me with coaching football, and I think a lot of sport coaches can understand this, is that there's never a time when you could say, okay, I've done enough of what I need to do for the day. There's always more film to watch. There's always one more recruiting call you can make. There's always something more that you can do. And I was never, I knew that at some point that there was just no, and I knew, that's how I was able to get a little bit of success, is because I was willing to stay late every night because I didn't have anything else going on. And so I wanted to make that change into strength and conditioning full time, because, at the end of the day, as hard as you work, there's still a limited time that you can be with your athletes. There's a limited time that you can, write programs, and, as long as you're not trying to overcomplicate things. And when I got up, I did an internship at University of Tulsa, and they put me in a dorm room, and Sean Griswold, who was one of my mentors, was, Rusty Burney. They took me in, and it was one of those, just a summer, but I learned so much. And I was still getting paid from Denison because we were on a 10-month contract, and I was able to kind of learn. And I finished up my second master's degree at that time. And it's kind of funny because you sit there and, at that time, people, want to hashtag, hustle and grind and all this stuff. They're working hard, and, and us as, strength and conditioning coaches at the college level, we just understand that that's just the norm. So, I think it's important that people don't make a bigger deal out of themselves for how hard they work, because everybody's working hard. And, for me, that was normal for me. I did my last season at Denison. We had one of our better years in a long time. And then I ended up getting a position at West Point, and Scott Swanson hired me on. My old D-line coach was, we talked about, and you and I know this, we've been colleagues, conversing at conferences and online for a long time. And we know that it is still about those connections that you make, because my old D-line coach, who also had to coach lacrosse, that's the typical D3, you're assistant lacrosse and assistant football, and, but he's now the head, Mike Murphy, a tremendous coach. He's now the head lacrosse coach at Colgate. And, he got me an interview, and next thing you know, it was one of the best positions I could ever had. And, we had some issues with had some, my brother-in-law had passed away, and then my wife's family had some health issues, and we knew we had to get back closer to Central Ohio. So when people talk about money, it was kind of funny, but I remember when it was the saddest thing, telling Scott that I was going back. And, when we moved back to Ohio, and this would have been 2005, this was, it was the summer of 2006, and we moved back to Ohio with a combined income of $18,000. And when people talked to me, it was like, how did you? Well, we just had faith, and we knew that it would work out, and it did. But that's what, that decision, that you make those for so many different factors other than your own. And then when I went back to Denison, I was there from Denison University from 2006 until spring of 2013. And, when in coaching that time, I was strength and conditioning again, and still football. And I was only the defensive coordinator. I was a co-coordinator for 1 year as we were prepping a younger guy to take that position. And then I was under a tremendous head coach that took over, that I've learned so much from. And I learned a lot about myself because you have one of those coaches that can call you out. And the one thing that probably, when I look back, I would always blame the situation that I was in. It was the situation's fault that I wasn't able to succeed. I wanted that position to split because I knew that, and you know this, but when you have so many different positions, I think so many different coaches try to get into this. The more things you do, the worse you're going to be at each one of those. You cannot commit 100% to multiple things. It just doesn't work like that. And because of having to do both of those positions, I became a little bit of above average football coach and a little bit above average strength coach, because I wasn't good enough to kind of do both, and I was in a position where I had a model in my head, and I think a lot of coaches go through this, especially at hey, we need a strength program at this high school, and I want to start it, and I had to tell myself, like, even if they were going to hire a full-time strength and conditioning coach, which I was fighting for so long, I had to be honest with myself and say, you know what, even if I convince them to create this position so that I can have a normal life, I might not be the best person for that position. And I always challenge coaches like that. I said, if you had to interview for your own job every single year, right? And of course, this goes against kind of the two loyalty is a two-way street. But if you really were in a situation we had to interview for your own job every year, would you be the best candidate? And I think that's something really that, that you kind of have to really take a hard look at. And what I would try to do, Adam, I try to create a situation that no one else wanted, that I felt in my heart was the best thing. We had a full-time strength and conditioning coach, and then added a football coach, and everybody was happy, and the student athletes would benefit, but nobody else was willing to put the resources into it. And all of a sudden, my ego was driving me to fight for what was right. Now, what was really right for all the student athletes? Maybe it would have been a better situation, but really it was because of me. And at some point, I had to know that, at that point, I'm working for the head football coach, was my daughter's godfather. He's still, such a positive influence on my life. And, we got a new athletic director, but it was one of those situations where my ego was driving me to make, to put myself in a situation that wasn't going to be successful. And I end up, writing an email to Dave Tate, and he ended up hiring me at Elite FTS. He created a position for me, and that was and that's always a tough situation. Anytime you go into a situation where it's a brand new position and they create a brand new position, there's no measuring stick. There's no one that you can compare to because it's never been done before. So as a director of education at Elite FTS, it was a tremendous opportunity for me, but it was hard because, it goes back to Lencioni, 3 signs of a miserable job. And I'm not saying in any way that I was miserable, but, you have that, you have that irrelevance where you don't know if what you're doing is making a difference. You have a measurement, which I don't know how do I know if I'm doing a good job or not? And I think that goes back to do strength and conditioning in general, and that's a totally different topic. But but the good thing about that was I was Dave let me kind of grow into the position. He let me kind of make mistakes and figure it out. And I learned a lot because I was involved in sales and involved in purchasing, and it was the first time, and we know this because as a strength and conditioning coach, regardless of the level, you don't necessarily have time to put the effort into writing articles and making training videos and doing all these things that are important. It's social media has been a blessing because it's got people more involved. But now, especially with young coaches, you have to have kind of a filter. And I thought maybe I can be that filter. Maybe I made so many mistakes that I was lucky enough that I had people around me that told me, this is, are you doing this for you? Is this decision, are you making, are you putting yourself above your athletes, by the decisions you're making and how your conduct is? And, I had a lot of people that were able to call me out, and thank goodness I did. And everybody that I've ever worked for, I've been lucky because I've never been yes to, and I've had people that gave me some tough love. And I was able to at least recognize, okay, this is what I don't know. This is what I need to figure out. This is what I learned the hard way. And this is what might have worked, and it may work for you. And then it gave me just kind of that, like you said before, it gave me a platform to connect with some coaches that, might not necessarily have the time. And not only just connect my knowledge, because my knowledge was just, that was that knowledge plus experience, that wisdom that I had was just a small part of the total, every time if I wrote an article, every time that if I had a podcast, the biggest thing that I thought was the most important was to have all these other coaches to be able to connect with each other through that media and through that medium. So I think that was one of the things that I was most proud of. And then, after about 2 years, for me, I missed teaching. I missed, I wouldn't say I missed coaching as much as I missed teaching. And I did some adjunct things with at Urbana University, and that was all good. But I just, for lack of better words, I think I had a calling. And 2 years ago, I had my principal that hired me. His 8th grade football coach was my college football coach, and I just got connected. And now I'm a Catholic school 5th grade teacher, and for the first time, and I did the math. I started teaching at age 43, so I'll be retiring sometime in my 70s or 80s or whatever. I probably won't retire at all. But it was one of those things where I had to have the courage and say, okay, is this really who I am? At the end of the day, when someone says and asks you, because honestly, Adam, and I think you know this, for me, I didn't think I'd ever want to be anything but a college strength coach, because I thought I connected with that age group, the college age group. And as everybody wants to be, everybody wants to be a college strength coach. And it's like, well, do you want to, as Adam Fight, my good friend, had said, are you in love with the logos, and just, that logo on your shirt? Is that what's really driving your decision? Because at the end of the day, it might not be, don't be a college strength coach unless you feel your best attribute is to work with that age level. Because again, as you know, there's nothing really glamorous about it. It really comes, and if there is any glamour in it, it may be for, a 1% of your total time that you're invested. But I love strength and conditioning because, there was not as much, subjectivity in it. And then, like I said, coaching is teaching. And so I never thought I'd get out of it, but it's one of those things where I finally just stopped. I listened. The people I asked for advice were a lot of my former interns and former athletes, because I thought they knew me as well as anybody. And they basically, anytime that you have and coaches in general, and you've gone through this too, I know, Adam, that you have these career decisions that you have to make. Okay, I'm going to uproot my family. I'm going to make this. I'm going to leave somewhere where I'm comfortable. I'm going to move across the country to do another position, or who knows how long I'm going to be there because of job security in this profession. And, the best thing you can do a lot of times is to talk to people. And even if they don't give you any advice, what I learned was, because I had to articulate it out loud, because I had to basically explain every side to whoever I was talking to, I didn't need any feedback. I gave myself the feedback because I was able to, I wouldn't have never been able to make a good decision unless I was able to explain, something to somebody who knew me pretty well. And that's how I end up in teaching. And like I said, this is kind of where I need to be now. And I think that, I'm lucky to have be in the situation that I'm in.
There's so much in that I would want to chew on. And I have like a page of notes that I've wrote down, but I want to start at this. Was there any particular moments, if you can recall, maybe in your most influential time, right? When you are mentors in your life, family in your life, coaches perhaps in your life, was there any indication or experiences that sort of led you down the road of coaching where you're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be a coach, but after looking back on your career, starting to say like, you know what, this was actually a very resonating moment that probably set me up to become a coach?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that I don't know if there was anything that said, okay, this is the career for you. I think I always knew that that was, the direction I wanted to go. And I tried to do both football and strength for the longest time. And I think I probably split up the strength because it was one of those things that, like I talked about before, it was, what can I get in a situation where I can outwork, everybody says we're going to outwork somebody, and who knows, like, how do you, that's really not ever even true. But I knew I could at least uphold my commitment to being as successful as possible and helping my athlete be as successful as possible, maybe more so in strength and conditioning. So that's what I thought at first. And the couple things I'd realized is that a couple things that stood out was, and I was able to, I've been in some tough situations. I was with a head coach, and I remember driving in a car, and I remember having him say, Mark, please give me a couple of reasons why I shouldn't fire you right now. And it was one of those things. And when I look back, it was just because I was a mess. I winged it for so long at my old situation that, no, I wasn't a good coach. And because I thought one part of my job I was pretty good at, and that would overlap everything else. And that wasn't not true. And I wasn't willing to put the work in to get better at all the things I needed to get better at. I was not a very good recruiter. I was not very organized, and it just hurt me as a coach because, at the end of the day, what you do as a coach, there's only a small bit of it that is actually on the field. And I think, that was for me. I knew that I had to kind of work a little harder. But a couple of things, like one of the things that I had I realized that, people that want to be strength coaches because they enjoy lifting weights. And I learned that pretty early, like, that may be the dumbest reason to ever get into strength conditioning, because you enjoy being in the weight room. And I'm like, that's okay if you enjoy being in the weight room, but you have to enjoy being in the weight room starting at 4:35, 5:30 a.m., eating all your meals on a plyo box, like, surviving on supplements, and and really it I don't think they understand. I had talked in one of my first podcast interviews with Tim Contos, and he said, like, for an internship, they have to understand what it's really like, what that that every day is really like. And I think sometimes those, we used to have internships at Denison, and I just didn't require enough time to really get to know those kids. And I did them a disservice because they didn't really understand what the industry was like, because I couldn't have them for enough time, so I knew that was a mistake. But I remember one of my interns had said that, he was a strong kid, and he was front squatting like in the 400s, and he had made a joke to our head football coach, and who, again, he's one of those guys that just, he didn't pull any punches. And so he said to him, he goes, Coach, what do you think? Like, you got one of your strength interns front squatting more than, most of your other linemen, back squat or something. He was trying to be, playful and just kind of, trying to, and he says, and I remember, and Jack Hayden, the head football coach, he looked right at him and said, well, you're fired. And the kid, of course, was put his jaw on the floor, and of course, and Jack was you never knew when Jack was kicking, but but I knew, and he just didn't. And this young man who became one of the best interns that I ever had, he was flabbergasted, and he says, well, why isn't it your job to get my kids stronger? And it's like, and he just. Why don't I have any of my old linemen squatting more than you then? And isn't that your job? And I realized that, and I of course, as soon as you get an idea, you're like, okay, I'll tweet this out. Maybe someone would understand it. But basically, being strong feeds your ego, and getting others strong, will feed your family, because it doesn't matter. And I understand you got to look the part and everything else, but that's the one thing I understood was it was really about it. You had to, don't steal the spotlight from kids you're trying to spotlight. Don't, it's not, these athletes are not for your highlight tape. These athletes are not for your YouTube page. These athletes are not to be models doing a video so you can get another job. So that was one thing that I had to realize too, is that, and again, a lot of things that came up, and, you continue to kind of progress as they've gone through. And I think the other thing that I didn't realize, and, for the longest time, we always thought, being in this profession, that, the biggest mistake in strength and conditioning, I think, is, and I wrote an article 2 years ago, and this was the biggest light bulb that came up for me. And it just came up. It was after I was done coaching. So I don't know if this answers your question, because it was kind of like, but for me, I think that I get a little bit numb to some of these conversations. I think every strength coach probably deserves more money. Yes, there's a handful that are making in the six digits, and we understand that. And most of them, they all work too much. They don't make enough, and that is their complaint. So they feel that is the end result. That is the problem is that I don't make enough money and I work too much and we're not appreciated as a profession. And I was even on some of these, some of these letters from the NSCA to Division III athletic directors to convince them to add a position, and not knowing that, and all these things that try to help the profession be, creating more positions, and, and really we're trying to validate our own existence as strength and conditioning coaches. And it took me till after I was done coaching to realize is that, for me, the underlying problem with strength and conditioning and the entire profession, and this can even go into the private sector, this can go into any kind of avenue, but the problem is that we as a profession have never figured out a way to objectively measure our own position. We had no idea how to, basically quantify whether a program is successful or a coach is successful or not. In every way, and it's one article, one of the last articles I written was, every single way that you try to measure a strength coach doesn't match up, because it's not directly reflected, in what you do on a day-to-day basis. We are a process-based profession in an outcome-based, situation. And it was very frustrating because, again, we don't have wins and losses. We don't have recruiting numbers. We don't have these things. I mean, you're not going to judge a strength coach on your record board. You're not going to, because, again, that doesn't have that might not have a correlation at all. You're not going to judge them on, okay, these are because I have our injury rates, right? And I think that's a tough thing that I don't want to hang my hat on whether we get kids injured or not. And yeah, I guess you can go, no contact, soft tissue injuries for lower body and reducing those, all things. But there's so many other factors that we're not in control of. So all those things, and wins and losses, and, games in the fourth quarter, and all those different things, for me as a strength coach, our kids may be more physical than another team. And we get a kid that dropped the ball, on fourth down, or we get, a kid misses a kick, or a coach makes a bad call on the field, or whatever it may be, or kids don't make their free throws. Like at some point, and that's why I always say, for strength coaches, please don't take credit for your team winning games, because I never hear a strength coach ever say, well, it was my fault. Our kids just weren't strong enough. I never hear them ever say that. So if it's, it's just like even in the private sector, if you got a kid that's a Division I prospect, because he trained at your facility, well, what about all the kids that didn't make a Division I? Is it your fault that they didn't make Division I? Right? So if it's because of the strength program that you won, then it's because of the strength program if you lose. You can't have it both ways. And I think that's the one thing so here we are. We're in a profession that we want more money, we want more position, we want more recognition, and right now we can't even measure. There's no way to measure whether I was better than my predecessor. When I went to Army, I was the fourth. When I went to Denison the first time, or in 2002, I was the fourth defensive coordinator in 4 years. And when I went to Army in 2005, I was the fourth strength coach in 4 years. So to me, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I would like to add some stability to this, and that might just give me a little bit of an edge if I'm here more than a year. But all of a sudden, I'm a better strength coach because I'm here. But how was I supposed to know if I was better than the three coaches before me, and the coach after me? How would I measure? Based on what? Based on programming? Based on I guess you can give some kind of a player satisfaction, but again, that's kind of one of those things that, and I did learn that, no matter how hard you make a kid work, they're not gonna, the harder you make them work, the more invested they're going to be. And I got rid of trying to sell coaches on my program and sell athletes on. I think we do that too much as a profession. We try to sell these kids on what we're doing, and what we're doing is and they don't care. Like, coach, is this going to make me jump higher? Like, I interviewed Bob Haleo, and it was excellent, because one of the mistakes that strength coaches make is they don't speak coach, they speak human performance, and it's not. We don't, and I think that and Brett Bartholomew had a really good post about, these kids don't understand that they're in their transmutation phase, and they don't understand those different terminologies. They just want to be better. They want to stay healthy, and they want to be better. And coaches just want their athletes to be better. And I think that we try to convince them that we're so smart with all these different aspects of training. And yes, that's part of it. But you're not doing anything what anybody else is doing. Someone else maybe just simplified it more and explains it better. So, for me, I think that, instead of justifying what we're doing, and I understand you got to get kids to work hard, but how was I supposed to, say that I'm any better than my predecessor? And if you can't do that, why would an athletic director or a head football coach pay me more money than the guy I replaced when I can't even pinpoint why I'm better than him? And that's the point. The people that hire strength and conditioning coaches, think about this, Adam. The people that hire strength and conditioning coaches, do they know anything about strength and conditioning? Do they know anything about sports performance? I mean, honestly, now, if you're an assistant director, your director knows what he wants, right? But from a knowledge standpoint and a wisdom standpoint, experience standpoint, most of those coaches are about on the same level. Right? Nowadays, because you have to have so many experience, you have to have a master's degree for an entry level. You have to have a master's to do an internship nowadays, because that's one of those filtering out processes, because it's a supply and demand thing. With that's another part of it. So you have that measurement, and you have that that just have that that surplus of coaches. There's way more coaches in our coaching jobs. But I think a lot of times, yes, they're on the same level. Like, you're a director, and I guarantee the reason why you were hired is because of your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge. But if you're hiring strength coaches at the high school level or a small college level, or most Division I schools that are hiring a head strength coach, the people that hire you have no idea how to evaluate you. Name someone that can tell you, that can walk into the weight room, right, at Colorado and say, no, this person knows what he's doing. Coach Ringler knows what he's doing. Is there anybody besides your immediate boss? Now, I guarantee some of the interns could probably help you and give you some better feedback than any administrators. And the thing is, the administrators are the ones that are paying they're the ones writing the checks. They're the ones that are creating these positions. Right? Now, if you're in with I understand it's a totally different dynamic when you're in with a head football coach, and that's what he controls. That's a different animal, and not many people are in that situation. And if they are, they got to attach on to somebody and just hope they keep winning and hope they move on to the right position, because there's a lot of coaches that got burned from that, as much as there are coaches that have benefited financially from latching on to a football coach, and so that's the pipe dream, Yes. And so for me, I think the only thing I think, if coaches really want, we can have discussions about how we appreciate each other, how we respect each other, how we need to get our profession to move forward. You can have all those discussions you want. But until we have, the only way that things actually move forward is that if you get those people in the positions, if you get those people in positions to actually do the hiring. So, for an example, if I move on, in order for me to actually be in a position where I can make money that is, and again, I understand no coach does it for the money. I understand all that. But to make it so that I'm not looking for a job every week, or that I'm not putting financial or family pressure on myself, is that you have to get people with experience in administrative positions. So the people with strength and conditioning, sports performance experience in administrative positions. And in order for that to happen, you have to get really good strength coaches and I'm not talking about assistant athletic director for athletic performance. You're just a strength coach and you don't have any teams. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like, literally get them into high-end athletic director positions, superintendent positions, if you're looking at a high school level, principals, everything, anybody that is making those hires. Because now you have somebody that has the experience to evaluate and say, listen, I know for a 100% fact that having a full-time strength and conditioning coach that's not going to leave next year because we're not paying him enough or her enough, to have a full-time strength coach at our high school, at our college, at our university is going to benefit every single student athlete. And that person we have to add another position because the student athlete to coach ratio is not good enough. But the people that are going to make those decisions are the athletic directors that actually have a sport performance background. And what it takes, it's going to take some qualified strength and conditioning coaches to say, I'm done in strength and conditioning. I'm going to be an administrator because I want to change how we do business here at this university. And all of a sudden now you get enough of that, the profession changes. But until that happens, there's nothing that you can do to change it. We can beat our chests all we want to about how important we are. But the people that are paying us as strength coaches don't see it. They don't even understand what we do, let alone that we need to be compensated more because we're that important. And I think that's where we are. And I just went off on a tangent. I feel like I blacked out and but that's kind of where we are. So until that changes, just status quo, know what you're getting into, and continue to, I think anybody that's getting into it, I told interns this, and of course everybody's written some. There's been a lot of good articles about internships, and I think everybody knows, you have to, and again, you have to prove yourself. Like J.L. Holdsworth had said, why am I going to hire somebody that I have to teach how to coach? So you have to intern. You have to do that to get the experience. And I'm not saying it's fair, but or legal in some sense, but you have to work for free in order to get the experience. And I think, for anybody that's trying to get into it, draw that circle, that geographic circle, and find out all the universities that you can intern with, and hopefully that will, that can get you at least jump started into getting some experience. But you basically have to save enough money to work. You basically have to find a coaching position that you can actually have another part-time job to allow you to coach. And I've had internships that have done that. I've had to pay security deposits on apartments and, find some guys jobs at pizza shops and bars and stuff so they can work at night and they can be in the morning to help me, train, because that's the only thing that they can do to get ahead. Because, a degree is fine, but, at the same time, coaches cannot afford to hire people without experience, and that's just where we are with the profession. So
yeah, I think there's a couple of things on that obviously the article, and you wrote a number of great articles for Elite FTS, but just to cite sort of the last 10 minutes or so, what is really wrong with strength and conditioning, and that is something that I remembered reading back in the day as I sort of went through that same process of trying to figure out, well, what is the measurable? What's our key performance indicator to justify salary raises or, just to be able to continue to keep your position? And it's, you hit really the nail on the top of the head. It's very hard to measure. Is it wins, losses? Is it maxes? Is it people moving on and going to the league? Is it injury rates? Is it your coach approvals? I think you wrote in 8 or 9 different metrics in which we could be essentially evaluated from if the administration wants to take that vantage point. So, and like you said, I think it takes really highly qualified strength and conditioning professionals to be able to move on to administrative roles. And I know Coach Bob Alejo talked about becoming much more active in doing that and sort of advocating for S&C coaches to position ourselves in that sort of in that area so that we can sort of maybe lead the next generation of hires down the road to set them up for a future of success. And one of the things, and just to kind of, as we cross this sort of halfway point and start to centralize a little bit on you as well, is that one of the things I really appreciate about you is just the transparency and the honesty that you share on social media, which I think can very quickly become sort of a highlight reel for all of your successes, but none of your failures. And, you've really sort of put yourself out there and shown some vulnerability, and because of that, I'd love to sort of ask this, and you've maybe answered a little bit of it, but was there any particular failures, like in individual moments of your career where you felt like, yep, this is, you came across this chasm, this failure, or apparent failure that just really sets you up for success down the road?
Yeah, I think, when it first happened, when you first get into coaching, I think that communication with athletes, I think young coaches try so hard. I tried so hard to make sure that people liked me, that I didn't do a great job of communicating. And I think one of the things that happens is, when you get into sports, that's the one thing about strength and conditioning that helps, is because, it's that, it's the weight is the same for everybody. It was the same 10 years ago as it is, 10 years from now. Like, there is some level of objectivity, that really gets away from, because I think that's one of the best. I think every strength coach should at some point try to coach track and field, swimming. One of the, because again, those are the stopwatch sports, and there's no lying in that. And I think that, aside from a technical flaw that has sprung up mid-season, or that that you can kind of track a little bit better, because there's that objectivity. Now there's still some subjectivity, in some other sports, but at least from the weight room side, there's not. But when I was a football coach, coaching D-line in Allegheny, and I think that I learned so much. I mean, Blair Robat was my head coach, and man, we did not see eye to eye when I coached for him. But once he was done coaching, I don't think there was too many coaches that influenced me, almost as much as he has, because, just because he was brutally honest. And, I had, when you're moving people up and down the depth chart, I think, especially, you have a Division III level, high school level, some of those, where it's not as, maybe as known, it's not quote unquote big business type. But, I remember moving a kid on a depth chart, and I told him, because we're trying to see some different combinations of different kids. We're trying to mix it up. And I gave him some BS answer about why he was, bumped down to second string. And I remember, Blair, he said, you lied to that kid. Now you tell him the truth. And I had to tell him, listen, you're not as good as this person. And I think that was one of the things that, and I think if the players are honest, and if you're diligent about film, you're diligent about, different things, especially even if you have interns, and you've created some measurable, like you said, performance indicators from a coaching standpoint. If you're able to communicate with them and give them honest and timely feedback, you can say, listen, this is why, every day is a job interview if you're an intern. And if you're a player, every day you're fighting for a position. It's the same basic parallel. And I think if you can, provide that feedback honestly and constructively, and making sure that those athletes or interns know that you have their best interests in mind. I learned that from Sean Griswold. It's like he told me that these kids will run through a wall from you if they know that you care about them. And it doesn't matter what you tell them to do. They're going to do it if they know that you're not selfish and you're not doing it to put on an act. And I learned that, from Grizz as well. And I think that, and that's another thing that I learned, from aside from being honest, is that players, your assistants, your interns, it doesn't matter. They watch how you interact with your colleagues. And one of the things that I learned was that one of the reasons why I thought that the players at Tulsa, even though I was there for one summer, had treated with me respect, and that I had such a good relationship with all of those guys, even though I wasn't there for that long, was because of how Coach Grizz had interacted with me in front of the players. I think it's such an important component that people don't understand. I mean, even in my fifth grade class, they see how my principal interacts with me. They see how I interact with other teachers, and they notice everything. And I think that that's one of the things that I made that mistake, and treating every single person with respect and honesty, they know. And I think that all of a sudden it's different when those players see how you are treated by your fellow coaches. I think it's a different ball game. I really do. And I think that's one of the things that has really helped with everybody says build rapport. And I get really, and this is one of the things too, I think I was the typical cliche coach. So my thing was, what's the most important things? Well, we got to be, you got to be trustworthy. Well, there's no such thing as being trustworthy, right? I can't determine that I'm trustworthy. I can't say that. I'll never say that because how am I going to say that? Because I'm not the one that trust is given from someone else. Someone else has to trust me. So all I can do is live my life with integrity, be who I am, and say what I say what I mean. And so that trust comes from somebody else. So I can't say, well, I'm going to go ahead and be trustworthy. Well, that's not. You don't get trust from yourself. You get trust from other people. And it's building a rapport. That's the other thing too. Build a rapport with your athletes. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to go build a relationship right now with this athlete. And I think that's BS cliche as well. Because again, how do you do that? What do you ask them? Well, you got to get to know them. And well, you do that by being a normal human being and actually care. Like if you don't care about the athlete, then it's going to be a real struggle for you to ask him, so you have any brothers or sisters? I'm like, like where he's from? Like they, where they're from. Like that's a made up cliche. Just interaction that's fabricated because you're trying too hard and they see right through that. So you be who you are and you make sure that you are able to interact in a way that is authentic. And I think when you look at the three things that are most important for coaches, you look at, number one is humility. That. Number two is empathy. And you have to be able to put yourself in other coaches' shoes. Put yourself in that, when anytime, like for empathy, anytime you have a coach that comes in and we have an athlete that comes in and they're horrendous in the weight room. So the first thing we said is this kid's a turd. He can't squat, he can't bend, he can't move, he's weak, and all of a sudden we just judge this kid. And this kid might be, the best lacrosse player or the best, soccer player. This girl might be the best volleyball player that school's ever had. And we don't understand the amount of time that has been put in to try to get that young person here from those sport coaches. We don't understand, as strength coaches, all the recruiting calls that we'll make, And being someone that has coached both sports and strength simultaneously, I knew. So that was a big mistake. I was very dismissive over people's, in the weight room, and that was just, for me, it was judgmental. And I never put myself in that sport coach's position and said, listen, they're recruiting these kids on how their talent and their skill. And it was my job to get them to not to be a horrendous squatter or whatever the measure was, So, and then the third thing besides, humility, empathy, is with authenticity, being who you are, So you have those cliches where you're trying to build trust and build relationships, and yeah, that's just part of it. That shouldn't be a goal. That's a byproduct of you being someone that people will look to and say that person is he's convicted in what he believes in or what she believes in, and they're going to make a difference because, number one, we are more important than he is, for himself. And I think, for me, that was the biggest thing that I had to, just get away from the cliches and just be authentic, because at the end of the day, whether you win all your games or lose all your games, you have to be able to do it your way, because that's really all you have. You can't go back and say, well, I wish I would have known, I would have done it differently. Well, you don't have an opportunity to do it differently. You have to do it the way that you know is best, and you can't be anybody else except for you. And I know that sounds like kind of childish, but I think that's a maturity level I think that coaches have to go through. You have those levels of maturity where you're only worried about what you think about other people, and that's where we have those people that on social media that just they have an opinion, and there's no my opinion about someone else's strength program or my opinion about another strength coach means nothing, because I haven't invested unless you invest time, unless you have some empathy to those situations and you're able to put yourself and understand their point of view, you haven't invested enough to even have an opinion. Your opinion is not worth anything. So, and like I said, that's a Brene Brown thing, is empathy is the highest form of communication, and opinion is the lowest. And that's really true. And, for me, I think, that second level of maturity is, you're worried about what everybody else thinks. You're trying to press them with your YouTube and everything else. And, that third level is when you start to, only feel, you care about what you think about yourself. You start to have some self-efficacy and you actualize, who you are as a person. And I think the fourth level is where most coaches have got to, where they're concerned with how those players feel about themselves, or your students feel about themselves. And I think that's that level where all of a sudden you are totally out of the equation. Your efforts are so important and so involved, but you are completely out of that equation. The people that you have committed to mentor and coach and teach are both sides of that equation. And I think that's where people, coaches have got to, and coaches have to get to. So, for me, those were the things that just, and it took me way too long to realize that and learn that. But that's, and that's why, to me, anybody that I've ever coached, anybody that I ever teach, anybody that, anybody ever interact with, your assistants should be better coaches than you will ever be. Your interns should be better full-time coaches. Your assistants, when they become, head coaches, when you're a director and your assistant directors become directors, they should be better than you ever was, because they should have their experiences and their knowledge and all of your experiences and your knowledge on top of that. That's what this profession is. And if it's not that, then it's just it's very shallow, and it's not going to last as long, because you're probably in it for the wrong reasons.
I know this at Colorado, where we've had, a number of our interns noses deep in NSCA textbooks, and we got some that are doing, CSCCA practicums and getting prepared for the national conference and their testing. And I thought it would be interesting because you've had various stops where you've been sort of the coordinator of internship programs, but what advice or general advice or specific, whatever you sort of want to go down, that you would give to a smart, young, passionate strength conditioning professional who is just about ready to get into the real world? They're just about ready to either accept their first GA position or their first entry position. Is there any sort of advice that you would sort of give to them to prepare them for what it's going to be like?
That's tough, because again, every situation is different and every personality is different. But I think for me, I think you have to do the essentials. People want to get away from that. People want to say that you don't need a degree, and a degree doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach, or a degree doesn't mean you know anything. And I learned from Trevor Cashy, who is tremendously smart person, one of the smartest persons I've ever interacted with. But one of the things he said, like, an exercise science degree does not teach you how to exercise. It teaches you how exercise works. So when you don't have that foundation, the bottom of your pyramid is very narrow, and it's going to come back to you at some point. Same thing with certifications. Certification is never meant that a person is a good coach. A certification will never get you a job. Now, it will keep you from getting a job if you're not certified. And most people that aren't certified are the ones that say that they don't need to be certified. That's how it works. But you have to kind of per se go through the hoops, because now if you don't, you have to justify that I'm so much better than the thousands of other recent college graduates that I don't need that degree and I don't need that certification, because I'm that much better. Based on what? What have you done? And again, that's to me, that's what I think the experience, not to overplay that, but that is a tremendous thing that you have to have. First of all, it at least shows that I'm going to be in this. And you can't get into strength and conditioning and say, well, I can't do it. I can't afford, it's not enough money. Well, you knew that going into it. I can't stand it. Why I can't stand any coach that goes through and it's like, yeah, I just, I've been working. It's just the money is just not right for me. Well, you knew what the thing paid when you took the job, so that's BS. It's just your expectations did not meet reality, and now you're trying to bail. And as for me, I was someone that couldn't hang. I bailed. I got out of the profession and I had to make that decision. And I think that's something that a lot of people are going to be in. And I think for interns, for me, I think it's a lot of it too is that to find that right mentor, someone that's going to go out of the way to teach and put you in a situation where you're going to be able to make those mistakes and gain that experience. There's a lot of, for NCAA rules, there's a lot of places that sometimes you'll intern and you're not even allowed to, because they have a coaching limit, that you're not even really going to coach, or you're going to be in the way if they did let you coach. So that big school might not be the best situation. I think a lot of times going someplace where that mentor, and that's the thing, same thing. This is maybe not advice for interns, but advice for people that take on internships. Another thing I learned is like, don't ever have internships or interns because you need to coach more athletes or you need the help. If you need the help, find a way to hire somebody, hire an actual coach. I had interns because I just needed teams covered. And I was like, wait a minute, this is totally backwards. Like, I need to spend the time. The more interns I had, the harder it was because you have to teach them how to be coaches. And it took a tremendous amount of effort to do that. And I think too many times, and even some of the private sector coaches are trying to model that D1 internship mode, and it's not really necessarily going to work because they don't necessarily have the time, or they don't have kids that have the time to put in. There are some people that do it, but it's really tough because if you don't have time to teach them, and I'm talking like some very comprehensive curriculum involved in the total aspect of coaching and get them exposed to some different people, it's not going to work. And so if I'm an intern trying to find a place to do that, I have to find a place where someone's going to be able to mentor me and be able to, I'm not saying find me a job, because that's not that meant. It's preparing you for finding the job, preparing you for interviewing for the job, preparing you for the next job. So basically you narrow that gap between expectations and reality. So all of a sudden your expectations is closer to reality. And I think that's why you have to be exposed to those different things. And you might have to do an internship just to get an internship. That's just how it works. That's just the supply and demand right now. And if you do that, at least you know if it's right for you or not. If you never get into it, if you never volunteer, then you never know if this is what I want to do. You know this. You have to love it. You have to be able to, you have to live and breathe it. Because if not, because to be honest with you, you're not going to make enough money, and you're going to work way too many hours to be in a situation when you don't love it. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't love it, find a job that pays a little more that you can pay your bills, and you don't work 80 hours a week and don't love that job. Don't pick a job that you have to work so hard for not a lot of money, at least at first, that you don't love. That's not the right situation. But and here's the situation too. Once you start an internship, you got to finish. Because here's what happens. And I've been in a situation. What happens if you quit an internship halfway through, or you stop, or you don't do very well? Well, all of a sudden, you just volunteered. You just worked for free for, 6 months, 3 months, 9 months. And now you can't even put that on your resume. And now you can't even use that head coach as a reference. So you just work for free and you don't have anything out of it. So don't commit unless you know you can commit. And again, you can't get your ego bruised up because I remember Sean, Grizz was awesome because he let me do warming. He let me, coach groups and everything else. But also I knew that when it was time to mix supplements, I took that paint mixer and mixed a 5-gallon jug of Gatorade a Gatorade jug, and I had 7 pounds of it had to be the weight gainer for NCAA regulations. But I remember mixing that stuff in a paint mixer and putting it in there and cleaning it up. That all that all the residue from the old protein drinks and stuff. I remember loading a golf cart with a bunch of sleds and prowlers on this is the kids' off days. Like, you got to do that.
Hey everybody, that's going to do it for part 1 of the interview on the Decoding Excellence Show with Coach Mark Watts. I know you had to take a lot away from it because during the interview, I took about 2 pages worth of notes on everything about the industry, about how we can change it, what we can advocate for, and how we can be the solution for the next generation of strength and conditioning coaches getting into the profession. But this is just part 1. Coach Watts and I are going to hop right back on the line and record part 2 of the Decoding Excellence Show. And this will be a fun part of the episode too. Hopefully, during part 1, you've gotten some background information about Coach Watts and why he got into strength and conditioning and sort of the genesis of his own career and journey. In part 2, we're going to discuss some of the best recommendations and pieces of advice that Coach Watts received, and what are some typical bad recommendations that he hears in the industry that is typically given out. We'll talk books, we'll talk about some of his new beliefs and behaviors and new habits that he has utilized to bring out the best in his life. Keep your eyes peeled for part 2 with Coach Watts dropping here real soon. But like always, I wanted to thank you, the listener, the audience, who is listening to the Decoding Excellence Show right now. Without you and the feedback that you've provided over the last several months, this show wouldn't exist. So thank you so much for your continued support with the Decoding Excellence Show. And please, if you like this show, do 2 things for me. Number 1, share it on your favorite social media of choice, right? And this will allow the circulation of the show to new people who wouldn't otherwise have discovered or explored the Decoding Excellence Show. And simply by sharing it, you're helping the industry out. Secondly, please go onto iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. This is the game of podcasting, right? Shows that have a higher review find its way up through the podcast charts and are more discoverable. So if you log on to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review, the show can be discovered more, and therefore you're helping the industry by putting this in the spotlight for other strength and conditioning professionals who are getting into this industry. And like always, this is an exploration of the tools, the tactics, the habits, and the intangibles that go into really decoding excellence performance. Thank you again. Hey everybody, I wanted to remind you that today I'm sending out my weekly newsletter. And what this newsletter consists of is just a couple sentences, a few paragraphs that is describing some of my favorite things, some of the things I've been finding interesting online. It could be research, it could be things I'm exploring, books I'm reading, things I'm listening to. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it. It won't spam your inbox. It comes out once a week. And it's a great way to stay connected into the world of what I'm thinking and what I'm exploring. So head over to adamringler.com, pop in your email, and you'll begin receiving the weekly newsletter immediately. And if you haven't already, please pop over to facebook.com, start to follow Adam Ringler, where you'll receive any of the updates and the latest podcast and Decoding Excellence Show materials online. So check it out at facebook.com/Adam Ringler.